And you are live.
Aloha snack bar, everyone. It's the one, the only, the mystical, magical, majestic ape with the master of the flux capacitor, CJ. And we have a special guest today who needs no introduction. He is the one and only, the American James Bond, the man, the myth, the mystery, the enigma wrapped in a riddle, the one and only W, who was standing by in a decommissioned Cold War submarine somewhere off the coast of New Jersey. With that being said, check us out on Twitter at the Rogue Money. Check us out on also our website, roguemoney.net, as well as the Rogue Money Facebook page. With that being said, check out our sponsors. If you're being hounded by creditors, they're hunting you down near the deep dark woods, and they're threatening to send Mike Myers on you. It's going to be like Halloween. Then you need to contact myfreedomnow.us, myfreedomnow.us, where we can kick the bankers in the nuts. Check them out, and they'll teach you how you can get debt free right away. With that being said, the mysterious enigma, W. How are you, sir?
Good. How you doing, Guy?
I'm doing good, man. I mean, we're seeing all this. I mean, where do I begin? We have the Democrats who are absolutely imploding on themselves. They're hyperventilating over this whole entire Russian. He talked to a Russian. I know you and I have spoken to a Russian recently as well. Maybe we're guilty, and but we spoke to a Russian analyst, not an actual Russian. So I don't know if that counts. But anyway, so many things are going on. Plots within plots, wheels within wheels, spy versus spy. Like what in the world, man? It is a fog of war like I've never seen before. What say you, sir?
Well, I did kiss a Russian girl more than once for many years, so I can tell you that I've been under the influence of those Russians, and it is difficult, for me to think straight at this point in time because
Yes.
I still, it's probably tainted my uh,
You're
uh,
thinking.
thing a bit, and so, and I can't say that I was exactly upset about that. Russia is our natural ally in a lot of ways, and people get stressed when I say that. But I've
Yep.
I've mentioned that before, even with your uh, membership, and it is not making sense that we're being put at each other's throats. Of course, obviously, there's this hegemony issue with us trying to close off Russia from Europe because what's really being argued over is who gets to sell their goods into Europe to own that potential market, east or west. And that's always been sort of the threat because, of course, you have all of this mineral and oil and gas uh, that needs to go to market somewhere. Russia's been opening up new market areas into China for some of that stuff and trying to spread out to other places and to the rest of the world. But at the end of the day, the easiest customer to deal with to get to is Europe.
Yeah.
And those people that are trying to close them off from those markets want to bring the oil in from places they control, uh, North Sea, the Mediterranean, and sell into that market and make the money there. So, um, that it at a very rudimentary base level is the origins of so much of the rest of these difficulties. And then you add the fog of disagreement and threats and all the other stuff. Who's going to control Russia? Whether it's the communists and Lenin and uh, uh, Stalin and all this other stuff and differences of opinions. And that isn't even classic Russia either because they had the monarchy, they had the systems that were in place for over, like Europe for 1,000 years. And so even the uh, recent political systems uh, that failed with the collapse of the USSR were not classic historical Russia. They were recent phenomena, and the Russian people, they're not our enemies at a religious level, an ideological level. Um, we share populations in many ways. The differences between us have been engineered into existence by players coming into this over the last millennia or a century.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely. It's pure brainwashing that we have this animosity towards Russia. It's pure brainwashing, pure propaganda.
Yeah, and so then you go, okay, this current situation with all the alleged drama related to Trump and the campaign stuff. Anybody that's a serious political player has had to have contact and interaction with the Russians. And so if we had somebody coming into a position of authority who wasn't having contact with the Russians at some level, you'd wonder on what basis, or even in contention. Obviously, this is where this argument, give and take, fight, Cold War, etc., has been taking place for about a century, a little less. And so don't you, or you decide you're not going to engage? At what point does it make sense to hire somebody into office who hasn't interacted with them or understood how to deal with them at some level and the players thereof? You're going to bring people that had no interaction. And then the other thing is, what, you're going to tell me that these other Democrat players haven't been having any interaction? Are you out of your mind? A perfect example, and people have forgotten about this. What was the context of Obama speaking to Medvedev on the podium when the mic wasn't closed? And what was he saying?
I'll have more flexibility.
I'll have more flexibility. I could work a deal after the election's over. Excuse me, who was dealing with the Russians before the election and having private conversations with the Russians about what he was going to do policy-wise after the election? And I don't care if he was president or not. He was doing it. It was very disturbing to anybody that was paying attention, because he was certainly doing more authoritative position than anything any player related to Trump did at any time, period, end of story.
Exactly.
And if you want to talk about before he was president, remember when he flew in and out of Pakistan and went through Russia at one point in time later, when he was a senator, who got detained and spent 4, 5, 6 hours out of sight from any of the rest of the people with the Russians on Russian soil being viewed? Obama. Right. He's had way more interaction and under nefarious potential circumstances than any of these other players have had.
Yeah, 1,000%, man.
So then you look at what's going on, for example, with the military and like that. It's wrong to act as though we haven't done anything. Our hands are clean, and we've been, clean as the driven snow in this buildup to a conflict with Russia. Prior to the Olympics in Sochi, we've been pushing every possible button on Putin and Russia, trying to push them back into their box so that we could do what we wanted to do in the Mideast with this whole Arab Spring, etc. And remember, Russia had a piece in Libya too, and felt that they got blindsided when they made certain agreements with us here in the West, and then those agreements were flipped on their ear in the course of taking out Gaddafi. The stuff that happened in Syria, the agreements that were in place there, the agreements that were in place concerning NATO and the Ukraine, not pushing NATO further east. That goes back to Bush 1. So at the end of the day, acting as though the Russians are the aggressors and not us with our IMF money and everything else is just baby talk. It's silly talk. It's the kids' table talk. If you buy into that, you're really not serious about having an honest adult conversation when you get right down to it. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you 1000%, man. It's the duplicitous nature of the left and this whole media thing and all the establishment cronies. It's incredible to see how they respond to this. You're right. How can anybody be in a public position in Washington D.C. without having some sort of contact with a Russian, without having some sort of contact with a Chinese dignitary? It's
Well, and be a serious player and a serious contender. Uh,
exactly.
uh, so the other side of this whole conversation is this: does that mean that I've gone pinko? Does that mean that I think Putin is the most wonderful person in the whole world, and that we should just drop our guard and everything else? Are you out of your mind? Come on,
No.
let's have an adult conversation.
Right.
This is a competitor.
Hmm.
If you were in a business, if you were in a sports, if you were vying for some girl's romantic love for the rest of your life, you would consider this person your best buddy, and you could drop your guard. Are you kidding yourself? Uh, a Game of Thrones type situation. There's a competition here, and the competition can become brutal. It can become life and death if you
Yeah.
allow it to get out of control. So, is there a way that it can be worked that could make sense that we both could have a win-win situation? Yeah, if you accept that they have people and a country and an economy to protect also, and you start working the situation and try to come up with reasonable uh, basis of relationship. People live in neighborhoods and have fences and get along for entire lifetimes. And you got other people that you got fences and somebody's doing something ridiculous, letting the dog go crap in the other guy's yard, and other stuff. The teenagers come over and have a pool party while you're gone on vacation for the weekend at your house, and somebody's got to get the teenagers reined in. Excuse me, it's life.
Right.
We have differences in interests, and we have interests to protect, and we need to be adult about it, acting as though the Russians should have no place on the planet and they should be confined within their borders and not do anything that we don't approve of.
Mm.
Probably just not realistic. But that's the way it's been done. So you go pushing those buttons, at some point they're going to come out of their box and they're going to fight back. And that's what I said, if you recall, way back a year before Sochi, and in the immediate aftermath of Benghazi, behind the scenes with various people involved before Benghazi even, that this was did not make sense. It was asking for trouble in dealing with the Russians.
Hmm.
This idea that we could kick them when they were down and they weren't eventually going to come back is insane. Yes, the Soviet Union, uh, there was a collapse of the communist system, but the people are still there. The raw basis for an economy is still there. They still have to live,
Yeah.
and they were going to come back. Were we going to find bases for building a relationship and for de-escalating the various conflicts? We had to defeat them because of what was going on with uh, this way that they were extending their influence across the world. We couldn't look the other way with Afghanistan. We couldn't look the other way with South America, with Russia or China. We had to engage them. We did engage them. Uh, uh, their system collapsed. We had opportunities and we promised to try to work with them to come up with the more even-handed system that was good to their people, that allowed them to become part of the world community. And the reality is, for all that there may be people that say we did that, um, that probably at the end of the day really isn't true. What we did is we sent in Playboy and Western music to
Right.
Russia after the collapse. Westernizing them was to somehow make them as corrupt internally, including in the politics, as we are.
Right.
And
And for a little
that
while that worked.
and for a while that worked, but you end up, what happens when you have? It's the same thing that's happening here, by the way. What happens when the central government collapses or becomes excessively weak? The mobs take control. The mobsters take control. Uh, and so, because the government can't provide, it can't protect.
Right.
And so the mobs take over. The mobsters took over there. And that's sort of what we've had a problem with here. We've had weak central government on the leadership side. And so the mobsters come in and wield that central power.
Yeah.
We've been under the influence of various mobsters
Right.
who've been able to co-opt control. How else are you going to how else are you going to portray Soros? How else are you going to portray, really, if you get right down to it? And I'll just leave the reservation a little bit in some people's minds. But Obama trying to wield power from outside the White House at this point in time, that's Banana Republic mobster rule. That's the
Right.
kind of stuff, getting all of his gangsta buddies to help him, including inside, to undermine, to cause subterfuge, by subterfuge, to cause the government to be dysfunctional and not be able to get into play, to oppose on all these uh, extraneous issues any person coming into office. Look, how many people even had a security clearance during Obama's administration that got into the White House?
Man, it was a free for all.
Yeah, and so to come in and then act as though all of a sudden you're got to be so careful with every person that Trump's going to bring in. Are you kidding me? And every person has to be absolutely meet their guidelines with precision instantly in every way. The reality is, I mean, I want screening, I want good guys, um, but somewhere in there, it's left the rails.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is this going to change though? Of course, we sort of knew this was what was going to happen and what was in play, and it's not going to change. They're going to continue to double down. So the question becomes, at what point does the tide turn? Because I think it will. The American people will not put up with it forever with this type of attacks, and
Mm.
they'll get other people into play. This tide will only go so far, and then it's going to move the other direction. And the reason is because of self-interest. The reality is, it's not in the interest of the American people to have um, uh, things this dysfunctional. Uh, the markets have been very favorable to Trump thus far because they have an expectation of where things are going, but
Yeah.
that will last so long, and then um, uncertainty. And the uncertainty of whether we're going to be able to actually begin to engage is going to become a problem. People aren't going to stand for it. And when the perception is that this toying with the system and everybody else is damaging our ability to function as a country in any way, I think you get the pushback in a significant way from the public. Uh, and of course, when's that really going to become the most apparent? In about a week and a half, 2 weeks, when we get back to this
Mm.
latest budget crisis issue.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. This is the whole Ides of March thing.
Well, yeah, and probably they're going to still be able to kick the can down the road a little bit, find other places to pull that money out of. But it's going to be a festering open wound. It's not going to be solved, um, and that's what this out crowd wants. I don't necessarily say Democrats, because the reality is you have a bunch of Republicans in there that are really still never Trumpers,
Right. Right.
and some of them are in pretty key places.
Mm.
We talked, off, you know, privately about some of what's been happening here just in the last week and a half, and I think that those Republicans that have been uh, playing footsie with the Democrats under the table are going to get some comeuppance, and it won't be that far out. It won't be in days or weeks necessarily, but I think as we get spring and the early summer, that's going to reach a point where Trump is going to be able to engage them or disengage them, if you will, uh, behind the scenes. I don't think it's going to be an open in the public fight necessarily, but Trump is the kind of person, much as Reagan bypassed the media and even the members of his own party and did what
Yeah.
had to be done in the public eye so that people could see what was going on. That's been a lot of why Trump succeeded thus far, is he has said direct to people's face in the open things that he believed was going on or that were needed to be dealt with. Was very direct. He didn't tell CNN and other media that they're fake news behind the scenes. He didn't complain to his news people to go complain to their news people about how they were conducting themselves. He said it right there for everybody in the world to hear. He didn't tell Hillary Clinton that she was an evil woman behind the scenes, or tell an aide to go tell her aide that he thinks she's horrible or whatever. He said it right there to the world.
Right. Crooked
This is
Hillary.
this is a crooked person. This is whatever. So Trump's not afraid to put it right out there in the public and say it on the line. Um, and let people make their own decision, but he's putting his opinion right there out in the face of it. Those Republicans that want to play footsie under the table with what they're doing and think they're going to be better off for it somewhere down the road, the reality is it's because they've got bones that they have to worry about still coming out, and so they're playing with the Democrats because they don't want those things to come out, and they're
Right.
probably going to bashed from both sides. They're going to squish like a fly up from both sides. So I, there's still a lot of playthrough to be done here. The one thing I will add is that for all that we're into this, a little over a month. Um, this is very early in the game. Trump is still consolidating power, and that's going to be going on even 6 months from now. He's been held up a lot in what he's done. A lot of it is rhetoric, but eventually he's going to start to get some real traction behind the scenes, and uh, succeed in starting to move forward. I think the one genius thing that Trump has done is not wasting time trying to convert these true believers, these hidden moles, these trolls that are in the system, to cooperate and work with him. He has stepped around them. So just like what's gone on over at State Department, where they just cleared out, whole floors of people, and everybody over there is complaining about the fact there's no work to do. They're
Wah,
bored
wah.
all day. All they can do is go to the cafeteria and sit and talk with each other because there's no work coming across their desk. Yeah, because Trump's not
So
wasting
sad.
time thinking that those people are going to do what he is directing to be done the way he wants it done. He's just shut them down. And those that time out, want to go find something else, go do something else, whatever, that's fine. He's just not going to play their game in their court. I had a situation a while back where um, something had to be done in a particular corporation, and so when the CEO and the CFO were discussing it with me, and we decided there was a point where they wanted to engage, I said, the place to do it is in the CEO's office. You're on your turf. It's your authority. We're not going to them. They're coming to you. They need to recognize on whose turf they're on, who's actually in control here. And the original desire was to go out to that facility at that plant and talk to them in their location. I said, that's you're on their turf there. They need to come onto your turf. Trump's doing essentially that. He's forcing them to come to his turf and play the game his way and follow his instructions and do it his way. And that's the way it's done. And then the ones that don't want to get on board his way, they can just sit there and rot in their little
Yeah.
cells their little cubicles and their little lunchrooms until he gets around to implementing things the way he wants and gets people over there to run things. Even at State Department, what do you do? He's cleared out the entire 7th floor over there. He's cleared out the whole office thing, and they're reorganizing it. When you walk in that building, it won't be the same cubicles. It won't be the same desks. You'll walk in and realize it's a whole different operation with a different way of answering to people, etc. I think personally that's genius, because where were the two worst places that Trump had opposition coming into office? The reality is it's State Department and the 3-letter agencies.
Right,
And
exactly.
primarily CIA. So when people wonder how he's going to get that under control, you're not going to go in there and get it under control by doing it on their turf, their way, with their people. He's sort of got a clean house and all the way to the walls, and decide who he still wants and start over, because there's too many moles and trolls in there. And the question is, he's been reasonably effective at State Department. How's he going to be at the intelligence agencies? That's the one that's in flux and in question. The other thing, and we mentioned it the other night, is the prior administration had really gotten control of State Department long ago, and CIA pretty completely during the course of this, and the other 3-letter agencies. The one place that they really hadn't consolidated control, and they were trying to take out people in various command locations for all sorts of reasons, was the military, the various branches, and the DoD. And that's a tougher nut to crack for lots of reasons. Probably the most important reason that it was harder nut to crack was because of the military academies and the academy way of bringing officers up through the system. You can override it, defeat it, but at the end of the day, you can promote the guys that came in last to senior positions like a senator or something. But long and short of it is that it is tougher. Those people have a different esprit de corps, and so as much as they had done to co-opt that and reorder how the military branches operated, they hadn't really completely closed the loop, finished the circle there. And is starting, I believe, most of his work to build a base from and get good people back into positions of authority, and move to the side those ones that were as it's been said so eloquently years ago, the perfumed princes out of the Pentagon. With their manicured nails and toenails and everything else and coiffed hair, he's moving those ones to the side and getting a different command structure in place. And he'll use that location and that base to then go back into the 3-letter agencies and to State Department to project power into the world and authority into the world and our place in the world in this ongoing conversation. It's risky for other reasons that we all recognize, coming back, totalitarian or military based or whatever, but we're in a tough neighborhood, tough world. This is not the time to play footsie with anybody.
Right. Exactly. Very well said. Yeah, I mean, he's doing a lot, man. He's literally cleaning out the proverbial rat's nest.
Well, and even beyond that, and the cockroaches and the spiders and all the, other slimy things that live on that stuff. The problem for the American people is that, and really the rest of the world too, is that when you get into the spy versus spy world, there's a lot of history that players behind the scenes know that wasn't necessarily fully told on the front pages of the papers, that wasn't completely understood even in the hallowed halls, because it's stuff that took place behind the scenes. But guys that have been there for a while they know a lot of the backstory. Their mentors, the people they worked with early on, know the real story, and they can tell you the real players and what was really in play. And so that history and that culture is a little harder to just pass down because you went to the right school or you got the job because you had all the right requirements and whatever. Um, uh, a lot of the players that carry that on both sides got weeded out. They timed out. There was a gap in the links of the chain that occurred in a lot of places. And so there's some cultural historical problem moving forward that I think we are vulnerable because some people know better than others, what that history was that got us here and who the players were that got us here. In technology, what you always worry about is a disruptive technology where you build fighter aircraft, let's say, and one generation's built and another generation's built and another generation, and a massive change really doesn't happen because the control systems, the communication systems, they kind of span between different um, stages of deployment, but you don't have a radical, completely new technology that's thrown in the mix instantaneously very often. When you do, it becomes a disruptive technology because it is so completely different that all of a sudden all your old communication systems don't work. All of your previous locating or tracking, firing, aiming systems are different.
Right.
In the intelligence world, when you completely just pull whole blocks of players out with a long history, it can be very disruptive because you become unpredictable to the other guys. The other guys become unpredictable to you. And that's sort of where we're at right now. We had a lot of people that were long in the tooth that suddenly timed out. And then the intermediate group is so political or to one side that they were either cut off from the long and the tooth ones, or for whatever reason they're going to get taken out right now, and you're going to have a whole bunch of new people. And so this handoff, passing the baton uh, between large groups of players, isn't necessarily going to happen or isn't going to happen well. And so that unpredictability is what I'm concerned about, because all of a sudden you have people making decisions, um, without enough knowledge, information, or because they don't know enough to know where not to blink. They do blink. Somebody's going to do something, over the top,
Yeah.
overreact, give information that is not accurate, but you got to be err on the side of caution. And so all of a sudden, um, you say things, well, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this really horrible thing. So, why take a chance? Bam, we're in nuclear war. Um, or something, some major conflict that in a prior period, you might have come close and you might have had big sweats of uh, bloody sweat coming off your brow, but you
Mhm.
didn't necessarily actually get into an actual for real all out shooting war. And my concern is that those guys that could be steady at the wheel and face down these situations and still work it through. Accidents happen, misjudgments happen, um, and next thing you know, as soon as it's like so many things, you get invested to a certain point, and you got to follow through. You get enough American or Russian guys dead on a ship, in a land engagement or whatever, it's going to turn bloody, bloody, bloody real fast. And that's where, um, you know, your operatives in these various agencies help to talk you through it and come to the right answer. Um, uh, steady at the wheel. If you don't have those people there, it's easy to have a miscalculation. And next thing you know, bam, we're there. And with the tension so high. I'm sort of rambling, but I'm trying to get a zone for
W. I had a question for you. I was really wanting to get an understanding, and what you just discussed kind of is a great leadway into it. And I'm very curious to see what your insights are in regards to Yemen, and in regards to the most specific actions that are there. Are we seeing a pivot away from Syria, knowing that they've lost their efforts there, and now we're seeing an escalated event in Yemen? And how much of that is Trump's foreign policy versus just still actual items by the Obama foreign policy?
Great question.
Well, the deal is this. We've been stirring the pot, stirring the hornet's nest for, very nearly a decade now there. And in that region, at least, 6-7 years with this administration, furiously going at it. Obama's first foreign policy speech took place in Egypt, and he said he was going to, reshape the Mideast. Essentially the same thing he said about us.
He wasn't lying.
Yeah.
No, he wasn't. I'm going to reach it, please. Just like he brought hope and change over here. Everybody had pocket change by the time he was done.
Yeah, if you had change, it was pocket change. The situation with what's going on really revolved around Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, let's cut the baby talk. Saudi Arabia is really a regime with the House of Saud that was fostered, groomed, put in place, kept in place by not Western interests, but U.S. interests, really. Aramco is Arab-American Oil Corporation. The Saudi oil has been the basis for the dollar and its movement into the world as the world's reserve currency, because all oil was transacted in dollars. That was the agreement. That's where it came from. And of course, it's the lowest lift cost oil on the planet. And that's what, because it becomes the leverage point for determining the value of oil everywhere. So with that as a starting point, Saudi Arabia and Saudi oil, in order as a starting point for leveraging the energy to the world and throttling or controlling the economies of countries all over the world using this Saudi oil in conjunction with the dollar. With that in mind, the Saudis eventually, with all that wealth and with a big brother to protect them, power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's what Lord Acton said. And so the Saudis have become extremely corrupt. They were already family, and they've become over the top a gang family with all that wealth and power. And as the situation has begun to change, of course, what part of the issue was why use the Saudi oil as opposed to ours? Because those players, those families who want to do it, number one, it's low lift costs, but here they can't control it on U.S. soil as easily and readily because of the way the laws are. So they try to close it down by environmental reasons, or like up in Alaska and in the Dakotas, where they set aside huge reserves, military strategic reserves, that was easy, cheap oil to access and get at, so that we could take the oil out of these other locations where we could control the governments better, etc. So then you come to Saudi Arabia, which was really a tool for us, part of the policy of hegemony against Russia. We did have Iran in that camp, and when Iran fell under the Shah, we lost a portion of leverage to the rest of the world. Some of that has happened with Iraq, with Saddam, when he was trying to move to a basket of currencies as opposed to just trading oil in dollars, and then did the trading bypassing the dollar, where he was doing the oil for grain stuff that was actually for cars and tanks and other stuff that was screwing stuff. So then you come back to, and so what's Yemen and Syria all about? It's about that this control position is eroding. And the Saudis, in an attempt to reinforce that, and the families here in the West that get their wealth and power in part from the Saudis and Aramco and wielding that energy power around the world, see the balance changing because of production issues in Saudi Arabia, because of the fact that Russia is still a threat to get energy into Europe, and that would threaten this golden goose of easy money in that market. The Saudis have used political power and control, and ultimately those families that control Saudis, which is not some people here, but those families that are behind the scenes using the Saudis as a front and the House of Saud as a front for their own personal operations, feel threatened. Who's going to own the energy markets for the next 50 to 100 years? Right. And all the wealth that comes from it. And so the game that's been afoot, for the last several decades, but especially this last decade, has been the House of Saud using their power to try to get pipelines into Europe, across Syria, and to use us as their big brother threat. Their wealth, our military, to control that those future energy customers being in their realm. Yemen is a problem because it's kind of in its own way. It's a Saudi Vietnam. They thought it'd be a piece of cake to go down there and crush them. Iran has been in there all along, doing mischief in Yemen, and so the Saudis decided that they were going to take out that Iranian proxy, and it's been much more difficult than anybody anticipated, because as they've raised the bar, Iran and Russia have brought in stuff, including a little bit with China, to assist Yemen and make it more and more difficult, and it's become a point of conflict that's not going to go away anytime soon. It's probably going to continue to fester, and ultimately you could see through that location events that would lead to the collapse of Saudi Arabia. One of the things that I have mentioned, for quite some time, is that for all that the Saudis a year and a half, 2 years back were being proclaimed to have 5 years of wealth that they could
reserves, right?
Before they ran out. That number is probably overrated and very high, and in fact, it's a much shorter period of time. As that gets lower and lower, their ability to stay in the fight is going to get more and more difficult. They need us to come in and finish what we started, and their game is to bait us into some type of an action that uses our forces to fight their war. Syria was a Saudi plan. Syria was the Saudis' intention. The whole Arab Spring was,
and they had the perfect president in place with Obama, because the Saudis did fund his way and open the doors for this guy to go to Harvard and whatnot. I mean, it reeks to high heaven, so that makes sense.
Well, let's put it this way: if Trump is a Russian tool, what's Obama? He was a Saudi tool.
Yeah.
Okay, so a Saudi tool all along. Seriously, that was okay. It's not okay to be Russian, but it's okay to be Saudi. Not that Trump and crew are in this Russian camp, but it's if they want to
Yeah, but
that kind
applying
of
the level of thinking to that, yeah,
to me, uh, when you talk about evil, corrupt, nasty people, the way that the Saudis treat their citizens, unless you're one of the royals or the princes or whatever, is pretty despicable, especially their women.
oh,
Um,
forget about it.
I mean, there isn't even a discussion there, but it's that's conversation that's not had um, amongst polite people at the adult table. We just don't go there because that would just be very rude or insensitive to their sensibilities. Really, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
these people are horrible, horrible people to their own population.
Yep.
Uh, and Yet we kiss up to them. Why? Because of their oil wealth? What are you talking about? Their oil wealth. The only reason they can pump a pound of oil anywhere is because of our military, and our
Yeah.
dollar. And
Right.
so they agree to use our dollar in order to get the military protection. Well, that's just hiring uh, hitmen for your mob. Okay, that's all it is. But it's mobsters still running it, and who's running those mobsters? This is what Trump is really facing, is that oil mob money that has been keeping a certain group in power, not only there at Saudi Arabia, but the players here in the U.S. that
Yep.
have benefited by having oil-backed dollars and the military to back it, etc. It's a club.
And one of the biggest other problems that Saudi Arabia has, man, is the fact that the whole southern, the whole southern area of the Arabian Peninsula is pretty much majority run by Shiites, and these Shiites are absolutely sympathetic to Iran. So they have a huge problem there. Every single one of those excursions that Saudi Arabia has done into Yemen has backfired. It's turned into worse than Vietnam for them, as Saudi Arabian M1A1s and M1A2 tanks go up like Roman candles, being hit by Russian Cornet missiles. It's a big problem, and the whole Yemen thing really flared up when they executed that Saudi cleric, who was a Shiite cleric who had long-standing ties to Iran, and he was a leader of the Shiite world in that whole southern province. And that's the whole thing. And this all goes back to the whole Sykes-Picot thing. When they carved up the Middle East and they made the map of Saudi Arabia, that whole southern part of the Arabian Peninsula is filled with Shiites, man. Big problems.
Well, and the other thing is this: while you have a Sunni Shia series of conflicts that have been engineered into place, that really, you want to blame anybody, blame the Brits. They wanted.
Yeah, exactly. Sykes-Picot.
This is part of the plan. Okay, well, they've got their plan in place. Let's go slightly differently though. Who's the ally of Saudi Arabia in what's going on in the Mideast right now?
The U.S.
Us, besides us.
Oh, the UK, man.
Israel.
Oh, yes, I forgot. Yes, the lowly
at this
Rothschild proxy
time, at this point in time, even going back to before Benghazi, the component that really wasn't understood, is very hard for people to get their minds around, is that Israel has been coordinating their activities, and some would say even directing the activities related to the Saudis and the connections to going into take out Assad in Syria. Of course, Israel wants a weak neighbor to the north, and so they'd like to see Syria divided up into a couple of different factions, several different factions, divide and conquer mentality. Hezbollah is a serious threat. As I said, months ago, the issue with Hezbollah is probably where this breaks out in this next conflict. It could have happened as soon as mid-April. It still could. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I expect
Wait,
that's
who wants to go after? You're saying that they're trying to go after Hezbollah?
no. Hezbollah is going to be coming out of their box to do something, probably late August to early October is my personal guess. But that's
Do you know exactly what area they're going to be going from excursions from Lebanon into Israel?
it probably
What?
it'll
Huh?
probably start. It'll probably start from the Syrian side, but Lebanon, Syria, somewhere right in that area. Um, Part of the issue with Hezbollah is, do they start something there, or do they start something somewhere else and then continue to escalate it there? Hezbollah is strong in a lot of other parts of the world, and that's their ability to reach out and touch the West, here in North America or in the Philippines, Asia, uh, places across South America. Um, this next conflict with Hezbollah probably won't be confined to just the Mediterranean, and that's kind of the threat. What's Hezbollah going to do, and how are they going to do it? If you're looking for the next uh, uh, primer charge that sets off other stuff, it probably starts with Hezbollah.
It's interesting. Like, why would they want to come out and go on the offensive? They've been pretty much defensive for the last for quite a while
Well, in
now.
fact, the question is anything Hezbollah more likely a false flag? As I mentioned, I think even
That's what I'm thinking
years
because
ago.
because it doesn't make sense because they've been very defensive. Number one, number two, a lot of people say, "Oh, they're a terror group. They're a terror group." It's really not true. They're more of a political party than anything else. I mean, Hamas was
Oh,
huh?
Hamas was created by the Israelis, by Mossad, but
Right, as a
Hezbollah,
counterbalance to Hezbollah.
yeah, Hezbollah has been using this time to consolidate positions, to build out. They've been preparing.
Yeah.
And what was interesting, and I think I mentioned it with you several months ago, there were reports that may or may not be true. I personally think they're accurate. Uh, that alleged that arms similar to those that we know Hezbollah has have been being bought up um, for cash in various places and allegedly by Hezbollah and stockpiled. Sense in that those arms that were being purchased that were similar to what Hezbollah can find cheaper and get easier going right direct to the sources. So having all of these arms suddenly bought up in the arms markets it was kind of a little unusual. I think that they were being bought up in preparation to use in some type of a fairly intensive false flag.
Yeah, it's very possible.
And that false flag then becomes an excuse to go in and take out Hezbollah. Because what's
here's the thing, though, bro. Let me ask you a question real quick. If they do a false flag, they blame it on Hezbollah, and they want to go in there and take them out. How the hell are they going to do that? The last time they quote unquote try to go in there and take them out was Operation Cast Lead, and Israel got a beating and a half. So during this time, they want to probably do a false flag. They want to go in there, but last several years, right now, they have the best guerrillas in. They have the best, probably one of the best armies right now in the Middle East is Hezbollah.
Well, and of course, here's the whole point. The they is Israel.
Right, but that's the whole point. So they want us to do the dirty work again.
They need us for them, and part of the point is that the crowd that's around Trump is very, very heavily this pro-Israel Jewish crowd. They, you know, you can just say it. They had a huge part, maybe the most significant part, in getting Trump elected. And in the course of doing that, expect some reciprocation. Have planned for it, are mapping for it, are gaming for it. And
Yeah.
part of the problem is that especially with the threats against Trump, they need to get these things accomplished and on a pathway to being accomplished as early as possible. And that's why, if you look at the timing, there was, I believe, a design in place to have a conflict in April that had a fallback position in late August to early October. And I think that they're at the fallback position point now. But what will they be trying to do? They're going to be trying to get Trump baited into a position where he has to um, follow through with assistance and protections, sort of a foreign Bay of Pigs scenario if you have to, but he'll have to come in and assist. And
Which will end like Bay of Pigs for us.
Well, it may or may not end that way. I think that we can go deal with Hezbollah and probably be reasonably effective. I'm not that concerned about that. If we're serious, the problem is that it commits us to an even more presence, probably at a boots on the ground level in those regions. And once we kind of get in at that level, the Russians have to amp up, the Chinese have to amp
up. And even before the Russians and the Chinese amp up, there's a problem there. And the problem there is this. In order for us to have some sort of a quote-unquote reasonable response to Hezbollah in Lebanon, because we'd have to go into Lebanon to deal with this problem. If we were to do that, we were going to be committing ground troops. And it's not going to be a six-man Navy SEAL team. That's not going to work. It's going to be a sizable amount. Because I remember very carefully what happened in Kasled. That whole Israeli debacle in Lebanon, where they got the snot kicked out of them. You had IDF special ops. You had Golan Sariyet. You had a couple of special forces units from Israel, which are the best in the world. And they couldn't even put a dent into what was happening in Lebanon. That's a serious situation. Now, imagine, if you will, and we like to fight wars where it's kind of sanitized, it's televised, there's not too much of a body count. We get into a war like that where there's a significant body count, where our boys are going in with all this hubris against a battle-hardened guerrilla army that is effective in utilizing their own backyard, and the body count starts racking up. That's a serious problem. Not even countering the Russian involvement in that area, and then the Chinese, which have been in Yemen since 1954. I don't like the way this is going, W. I don't like it.
Well, again, you have to think longer term. When they weren't able to correct the problem, shut the problem down with Hezbollah in the last couple of engagements and make it go away, they had to come up with plans, longer term plans, to address this that might have an actual for real solution. So you look at everything that's transpired in between and say, well, this is all part of an operation to suck us into coming in to have this battle once and for all and get it over with and solve the problem. That's perhaps got a lot to do with it. If you think about Obama, Hillary, that whole crowd, very much so locked into a side that you could say wasn't necessarily going to help Israel. It was going to help the Saudis, but it was not going to help Israel. And so the Israeli solution to that is not to kick the Saudis to the curb or that situation, but to change the crowd to a pro-Israel and pro-Saudi crowd. And that's what all of this is really all about right now, is changing the whole it slightly. In other words, this isn't a 180-degree turn that we're coming up on. This is a deflection to do a little different than what we might otherwise have done with.
But you know the funny thing is, man, it's going to end in abject failure. It's not going to work.
Well, I think that that's probably true. And of course, what's World War III all about? What's coming here in the short term is not World War III, but what comes next after this next conflict probably is World War III, because now you get us committed again in a way where we can't extricate ourselves. Beware of foreign entanglements. If we get in this next conflict, if we get sucked into it one way or the other, it probably means a pretty intensive buildup to, because we start staging again, and the Russians start staging, and the Chinese start staging, and now you do have the potential for, World War III over Syria, over Lebanon and portions thereof. They can't back down. The Russians cannot back down at that location for 50 reasons.
For a lot of reasons.
Times. So their red line is Syria.
Right.
I think I said first privately to you and others immediately after Benghazi. You have to understand their red line is Syria. And they will not back down. And that's still going to be the case. Right. So if we want to press, we want to use Hezbollah, or somebody baits us into using Hezbollah as the excuse to go in and get Syria divided. They're not backing down. If we're committed, and we can't back down for political reasons, for military reasons.
Yeah, but you know what, man? Here's the other angle, bro. Look at the amateur hour that's been running the intelligence committees. The intelligence agencies last several years. They quote unquote set off a false flag chemical attack in Syria using Syrian rebels as a proxy group. That backfired. Nobody fell for that. So every single one of their false flags have blown up in their own face. Number one. Number two, these nut job, again, forecasting in a vacuum, speaking into an echo chamber planners that we have today in the United States military and intelligence and in most of the Western world, they are, again, looking at it from a very myopic angle. There's a whole new world being formed right now. What's going to happen when these guys says, okay, we're going to commit troops? The Chinese and Russians, they're not stupid. They're far smarter than we are. They decide to hit that U.S. Treasury. Look, man, this whole thing ends if President Xi Jinping wakes up one day and says, okay, you know what? There's a red button with the letter F on it. It says F it. He hits that button. U.S. treasuries are dumped. It's over. We'll commit troops to Syria, but we'll be so damn broke that we won't be able to get them out. That's the worst case scenario for us.
Well, again, I think that the way this game plays out, the way that these people on the inside have gamed it out for quite a long time, is that Russia and the U.S. Have a major conflict, and China's the odd man out, and whatever alleged commitments they're going to make to be involved, etc., they somehow are allowed to stay to the sidelines. The rest of the world at some point comes back in and deals with China at a later point in time of the UN or the British Commonwealth military operation. But this next big conflict, World War III, at the end of the day, is a U.S.-Russian matter, and if that is allowed to occur the way these people have intended, designed, because remember, at the end of the day, what do they want? They want a new world order.
Right.
These people that are pulling the levers want a new world order.
Well, so that's their masturbation poster is a mushroom cloud.
Well, and so in the course of getting to a new world order, they don't care if they crack a few eggs, because that's part of the design. That's where they don't see these people benefiting if the U.S. is essentially, turned into the Mojave?
Yeah.
If Russia is turned into the Gobi, they think that it somehow just isn't in these people's minds that would be an option. But the reality is, I think it is in their minds. They are playing for the next 1,000 years of world domination, and the U.S., in their phoenix mentality, is ripe for self-immolation so that they can bring a new empire out of it. That's their game for control of the world, has been to raise up an empire and then self-immolate and rise out of the ashes somewhere else with a new Rome. Again, the same families, the same people, dominating seemingly from nowhere. In reality, new faces, new names, new everything, but it's actually the same families, the same faces, just different labels. And so this next conflict works for them, because at the end of the day, they're going to start the world over upside down.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And with that being said, man, go ahead, CJ.
No, we're gonna have to schedule a part 2, bro, because we haven't even talked about Iran yet.
Yeah, no, we haven't. CJ, me and CJ will schedule with you for part 2. Then we'll get into Iran. We're basically ran over our hour for the show. W, any closing comments, man? You got 30 seconds. W.
Keep your powder dry. Inflation's coming, and while you can be in the markets right now, markets code for 29,000. There's going to be, so don't lose perspective and think that it's going all down or all up, continuously the direction. There's a lot of twists in the road ahead, and the next battle isn't World War III. The next battle is the lead up to World War III. World War III is somewhere a little further down the road, a year or two down the road. So
yeah, I'm hearing some murmurs that's 2020. We'll see what happens, man. A lot of interesting stuff.
Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening in. Again, you can follow us on Twitter at the Rogue Money. Check us out on roguemoney.net. And you can't follow W anywhere because he's going to go back into the sub, where he will descend back into the fjords of Greenland with a bevy of beautiful, buxom Russian babes. And that being said, this is me. This is me, the Guerrilla Economist, and the one and only CJ, the master of the flux capacitor. We are over and out. Take it away.